What happens when an entitled celebrity thinks they can control a late-night talk show? Tonight, we dive into one of the most explosive interviews in television history, where a guest's outrageous behavior led to something unprecedented. You're about to witness how a simple question about charity work spiraled into a complete meltdown, with accusations flying and a host pushed to his absolute limit. This is the story of how one interview went from friendly chat to total disaster in under 20 minutes. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this one will leave you speechless. The Late Show studio buzzed with its usual pre-taping energy. Stephen Colbert sat behind his desk, reviewing his notes one final time. His producers had briefed him thoroughly about tonight's guest, a former royal who had built a media empire on controversy and carefully crafted victim narratives. The audience was already seated, cameras positioned, and the familiar theme music ready to roll. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Meghan Markle, Colbert announced with his trademark grin as the studio audience erupted in polite applause. She walked onto the stage wearing an elegant black dress, her smile practiced and camera ready. The handshake was brief, the pleasantries minimal. "Great to have you here," Colbert said as they settled into their chairs. "I have to say, you've been quite busy lately with your various projects." "Thank you for having me, Stephen. Yes, it's been an incredible journey of growth and authenticity," she replied, her voice carrying that familiar tone of rehearsed sincerity. Colbert leaned forward slightly. "Let's start with something your fans are curious about. Your recent charity work has been getting attention, but some critics have pointed out that very little of the money raised actually reaches the intended recipients. Can you walk us through how your foundation operates?" The question hung in the air for a moment. Meghan's smile faltered, almost imperceptibly, but she quickly recovered. "Stephen, I think there's been some misinformation circulating. What we do is create sustainable change, not just throw money at problems. But the financial reports show that over 70% of donations go to administrative costs and salaries. That's significantly higher than most reputable charities." Colbert pressed, his journalist instincts kicking in. "I'm not here to discuss internal financial matters," Meghan replied, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "I'm here to talk about the positive impact we're making in communities around the world." The studio audience began to sense the tension. Colbert glanced at his notes, then looked back at her. "I understand, but transparency is important when you're asking the public for donations. Surely you can explain why such a large percentage goes to overhead?" "What I can explain is that you're clearly trying to ambush me with gotcha questions," Meghan snapped, her composure beginning to crack. "This isn't journalism, it's a hit job." Colbert's eyebrows raised slightly. "I'm sorry, but asking about publicly available financial information isn't an ambush. It's a legitimate question that your donors deserve an answer to." "My donors? These aren't my donors, Stephen. These are people who believe in creating meaningful change, not feeding into tabloid narratives," she shot back, her voice rising. "The numbers come from your own tax filings, not tabloids," Colbert replied calmly. "But let's move on. You've been vocal about privacy rights, yet you've done numerous interviews, podcasts, and documentaries, sharing very personal details about your life. How do you reconcile wanting privacy while simultaneously courting publicity?" Meghan's face flushed. "Are you seriously asking me that, after everything I've been through? The harassment, the racism, the complete lack of support from institutions that should have protected me? I'm asking about the apparent contradiction between claiming to want privacy while actively seeking media attention," Colbert said, his tone remaining professional but firm. "There's no contradiction when you're trying to correct lies and misinformation," she replied, her voice becoming more agitated. "When people are spreading false narratives about you, you have a responsibility to set the record straight. But some of the details you've shared seem quite personal, things that go beyond correcting misinformation. For instance, your recent podcast episode about intimate conversations with family members. Those weren't intimate conversations, they were examples of the systemic issues I was dealing with," Meghan protested, her hands gesturing more emphatically. Colbert nodded slowly. "Okay, let's talk about those systemic issues. You've made some pretty serious allegations about the royal family, including claims about racism and lack of support. But when pressed for specific examples or evidence, you often speak in generalities. Can you give us concrete examples?" "I've given plenty of examples," Meghan said, her voice taking on a defensive tone. "The problem is that people don't want to hear the truth. They want to protect an institution that has shown its true colors." What specific incident of racism occurred? Who said what to whom? Colbert asked directly. Meghan paused, her jaw tightening. I'm not going to repeat conversations that were meant to be private. But you've already discussed them publicly in other interviews, Colbert pointed out. You've made these allegations the centerpiece of your narrative. Surely you can provide details to support such serious claims. I don't have to prove anything to you or anyone else, Meghan replied, her voice rising again. The fact that you're even questioning this shows exactly the kind of bias I'm talking about. The studio audience was completely silent now, sensing the interview was spiraling out of control. Colbert maintained his composure, but his expression showed he was not going to back down. I'm not questioning your experiences. I'm asking for specifics about claims that have had significant impact on public opinion about the royal family, he said. That's not bias, that's basic journalism. Basic journalism? Meghan laughed bitterly. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You bring me on your show under false pretenses, then attack me with loaded questions designed to make me look bad. The questions were submitted to your team in advance, Colbert replied. Your publicist approved this line of questioning. My publicist never approved this ambush, Meghan shot back, her voice becoming increasingly hostile. This is completely inappropriate and unprofessional. The tension in the studio was palpable as the interview continued to deteriorate, setting the stage for an even more explosive confrontation. Colbert took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain control of the rapidly deteriorating situation. Look, I think we can both agree that this conversation has gotten more heated than intended. Let's try to reset and focus on your current projects. No, Stephen, we can't just reset, Meghan replied, her voice dripping with indignation. You've already shown your true intentions. This entire interview has been designed to discredit me from the moment I walked out here. That's simply not true, Colbert said firmly. These are standard questions that any public figure would be asked, especially someone who has made such significant public statements. Standard questions? Meghan's voice pitched higher. You're treating me like a criminal defendant instead of a guest on your show. This is hostile and completely unprofessional. The studio audience exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some began shifting in their seats, clearly sensing this was unlike any interview they had witnessed before. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of the escalating confrontation. I'm treating you like someone who has made serious public allegations and asking you to substantiate them, Colbert replied, his patience clearly wearing thin. Let's try a different approach. You've spoken extensively about your mental health struggles during your time in the royal family. You mentioned feeling suicidal. That's obviously a very serious claim. Are you questioning my mental health struggles now? Meghan interrupted, her eyes flashing with anger. Are you really going to sit there and suggest I was lying about contemplating suicide? I'm not suggesting anything, Colbert said calmly. I'm asking about the timeline and the help you sought. You said you asked for help but were denied. Who specifically did you ask? What kind of help did you request? I asked the institution, the people who were supposed to protect me, Meghan replied vaguely. I went to HR. I went to senior staff members. But the palace has stated that they have no record of any formal requests for mental health support, Colbert pressed. They've said that had such a request been made, it would have been immediately addressed. Of course they would say that, Meghan scoffed. They're protecting themselves. They're not going to admit they failed someone who was crying out for help. So you're saying they're lying? Colbert asked directly. I'm saying they're protecting an institution that has shown it cares more about its image than the people within it, Meghan deflected. That's not an answer to my question, Colbert pointed out. Did you make formal requests for mental health support? And if so, to whom specifically? Meghan's face reddened. I don't have to provide you with a detailed breakdown of my lowest moments to satisfy your curiosity, Stephen. The fact that you're even asking these questions shows a complete lack of empathy. I'm asking these questions because mental health is a serious issue, and if institutions are failing people who need help, that's important, Colbert replied. But if you're going to make such serious allegations publicly, people deserve to know the specifics. People deserve to know that I was suffering and no one helped me, Meghan shot back. That should be enough. The fact that you need more proof shows exactly the kind of skepticism that prevents people from speaking out. It's not skepticism, it's journalism, Colbert said, his voice taking on a harder edge. When someone makes claims that damage reputations and institutions, those claims need to be substantiated. Damage reputations? Meghan's voice reached a new pitch. What about the damage to my reputation? What about the years of racist attacks and harassment I endured while they did nothing to protect me? Let's talk about those racist attacks, Colbert said, leaning forward. You've made very serious allegations about racist comments from family members. Can you tell us specifically what was said and who said it? I've already addressed this in previous interviews, Meghan replied evasively. Actually, you haven't, Colbert countered. You've alluded to conversations about your son's skin color, but you've never specified who made these comments or what exactly was said. Because I'm trying to protect people, even people who didn't protect me, Meghan said, her voice becoming more agitated. But you've already damaged those people by making the allegations public, Colbert pointed out. If you're going to make such serious claims, don't you think you owe it to everyone involved to be specific? I don't owe anyone anything, Meghan snapped. I've been through enough without having to justify every detail of my trauma to satisfy your need for a gotcha moment. This isn't about gotcha moments, Colbert replied, his composure beginning to crack. This is about truth and accountability. You've made allegations that have had serious consequences for people and institutions. You can't just make vague claims and then refuse to provide details when questioned. I can do whatever I want, Meghan said defiantly. I don't answer to you or anyone else. I've told my truth, and that's enough. Your truth? Colbert's eyebrows shot up. There's only one truth, and if you're not willing to provide specifics about these serious allegations, then maybe they shouldn't have been made public in the first place. How dare you? Meghan said, her voice shaking with anger. How dare you suggest that I shouldn't have spoken out about the racism and abuse I experienced? You have no idea what I went through. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't speak out, Colbert replied firmly. I'm suggesting that if you're going to make serious allegations, you should be prepared to back them up with specifics. I don't have to back up anything to you, Meghan shot back. The fact that you're demanding proof of my trauma shows exactly the kind of victim-blaming mentality that keeps people silent. I'm not victim-blaming, Colbert said, his voice rising slightly. I'm asking for the same level of accountability that any public figure would be expected to provide when making serious allegations. Any public figure? Meghan laughed bitterly. You mean any black woman who dares to speak out against powerful white institutions? Right? Because that's what this is really about. The studio fell into stunned silence. Even the production crew seemed taken aback by the direction the interview had taken. Colbert stared at her for a moment, clearly processing what she had just said. That's completely inappropriate, he said finally. You're now suggesting that my questions are racially motivated, which is both unfair and untrue. Is it? Meghan challenged. Would you be grilling a white woman this aggressively about her mental health struggles and experiences with racism? I would ask the same questions of anyone who made such serious public allegations, Colbert replied firmly. Race has nothing to do with it. Everything has to do with race when you're a black woman speaking truth to power, Meghan shot back. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point, with both host and guest clearly beyond any hope of civil discourse. The studio atmosphere was electric with tension. Colbert's face had hardened, his usual jovial demeanor completely replaced by barely contained frustration. The audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing what was clearly an unprecedented breakdown of a late-night interview. I need to stop you right there, Colbert said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. You just accused me of racial bias for asking legitimate journalistic questions. That's completely out of line, and frankly, it's insulting. Insulting? Meghan's voice cracked with indignation. What's insulting is being brought on a show under false pretenses and then being subjected to this interrogation. You're trying to tear me down because you can't handle a strong black woman speaking her truth. This has nothing to do with your race or your strength, Colbert replied, his patience clearly exhausted. This has to do with your refusal to provide basic substantiation for serious allegations you've made publicly. That's not strength, that's deflection. Deflection? Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I'm not deflecting anything. I'm refusing to be bullied by someone who clearly has an agenda. The only agenda here is getting honest answers to honest questions, Colbert said, remaining seated but his voice growing firmer. Something you seem incapable of providing. I don't have to provide you with anything. Meghan shot back, her voice echoing through the studio. I came here in good faith, and you've turned this into a witch hunt. Good faith? Colbert's voice rose. You've accused me of racial bias, questioned my professionalism, and refuse to answer basic questions about claims you've made publicly. That's not good faith. That's manipulation. Manipulation? Meghan's eyes flashed dangerously. You want to talk about manipulation? Let's talk about how you've edited this interview to make me look bad. Let's talk about how you've framed every question to trip me up. This is a live taping, Colbert said incredulously. Nothing has been edited. Everything you've said and done has been in front of this audience. That's exactly what someone with an agenda would say, Meghan replied, her voice becoming increasingly erratic. You've probably coached this audience to react a certain way. The audience members looked around at each other in confusion and disbelief. Some began murmuring, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the interview had taken. A few shook their heads in apparent disappointment. Are you seriously suggesting that I've manipulated my audience? Colbert asked, his voice filled with disbelief. You're now attacking not just me, but the integrity of this entire show and everyone in it. I'm exposing the truth about how the media works, Meghan declared, her voice carrying a manic edge. This is exactly what I've been talking about. This is the kind of treatment that drove me to contemplate suicide. Don't you dare, Colbert said sharply, his voice cutting through her dramatics. Don't you dare use mental health as a weapon to avoid accountability. That's not just inappropriate, it's dangerous. Dangerous? Meghan laughed harshly. What's dangerous is bringing someone on your show and then ambushing them with hostile questions designed to make them look unstable. The only person making you look unstable is you, Colbert replied bluntly. Your behavior tonight has been completely inappropriate, and frankly, it's been revealing. Revealing of what? Meghan challenged, her voice dripping with hostility. Revealing of someone who can't handle being asked to back up their claims with facts? Colbert said, his journalistic instincts fully engaged. Someone who immediately plays victim when challenged, someone who uses race as a shield when questioned, and someone who apparently thinks they're above the basic standards of accountability that apply to everyone else. How dare you psychoanalyze me, Meghan seethed. You don't know anything about me or what I've been through. I know what you've told the public, Colbert replied steadily, and I know that when asked to provide specifics about those claims, you've deflected, attacked, and made baseless accusations against me and this show. Baseless? Meghan's voice reached a shrill pitch. Everything I've said tonight has been completely justified. You've been hostile and unprofessional from the moment I sat down. I've been professional throughout this entire interview, Colbert replied firmly. I've asked fair questions. I've given you multiple opportunities to clarify your statements, and I've maintained my composure despite your increasingly erratic behavior. Erratic behavior? Meghan moved closer to his desk, her voice becoming more agitated. You think defending myself against your attacks is erratic? I think accusing me of racial bias, questioning the integrity of my show, suggesting I've manipulated my audience, and refusing to answer basic questions about your public statements is erratic. Yes, Colbert replied, not backing down. Then maybe this interview is over, Meghan declared, starting to remove her microphone. Maybe it is, Colbert agreed, his voice calm but firm. But before you go, I want to be clear about something. You came on this show to promote your projects and share your story. Instead, you've shown viewers exactly who you are when challenged. You've been defensive, hostile, and dishonest. You've made serious allegations that you refuse to substantiate, and when pressed for basic accountability, you've resorted to personal attacks and playing victim. I'm not playing victim, Meghan protested weakly, her bravado beginning to crumble. You've blamed me, my show, my audience, and even society as a whole for your inability to answer simple questions, Colbert continued. That's not strength. That's weakness. That's not truth-telling. That's deflection. And frankly, it's insulting to real victims of racism and abuse. You have no right to judge me, Meghan said, her voice breaking slightly. I have every right to judge your behavior on my show, Colbert replied. And your behavior tonight has been completely unacceptable. You've shown a complete lack of respect for this platform, for me, and for the audience that came here to hear honest conversation. This conversation is over, Meghan announced, pulling off her microphone and dropping it on the chair. Yes, it is, Colbert agreed, turning to face the camera as she stormed toward the exit. Ladies and gentlemen, that was supposed to be an interview about current projects and charitable work. Instead, you witnessed something unprecedented in television history. The audience remained silent, still processing what they had just witnessed. As Meghan disappeared backstage, Colbert shook his head and looked directly into the camera. "I've been doing this for a long time, and I've never had a guest behave that way. We ask tough questions here, but we ask them fairly and with respect." What you saw tonight was someone who simply couldn't handle being held accountable for their own words and actions. The studio remained eerily quiet as the implications of what had just transpired began to sink in. The interview that was supposed to rehabilitate a public image had instead revealed the true character of someone who claimed to champion truth and authenticity. That's the complete story of one of the most explosive interviews in television history. What did you think about the way this guest handled the pressure? Drop a comment below and let me know if you think the host was fair or too aggressive. And if you want to see more breakdowns of controversial interviews and celebrity meltdowns, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell.